Grain is, without a doubt, one of the most underappreciated resources not only in our country but throughout the entire world. It is extremely prevalent. Every day, unfathomable amounts of grain are consumed mindlessly by the masses, with little or no thought as to how it got onto their plates. What most don't know is that this is one of the most dangerous processes in the world. Imagine, for a second, you're but a humble grain farmer, attending to your daily duties. You realize it may have been a while since you rotated the grain to prevent rot, and you have a couple hours on your hands, so why not? You ascend the approximately 20-foot ladder of your family-owned grain silo. After entering, you stand on the surface, noticing its abnormal crustiness. As this is nothing new, you think little of it. As you begin to rake, however, the unthinkable happens. The ground below your feet breaks. You let out a shriek of terror, realizing that all the horror stories you had been told were coming true. Millions of tiny grains rush over your body. You take your last breath before being completely engulfed in a grainy darkness, a sight that most likely will be your last. What I've just described to you is grain entrapment, and it's an extremely common agricultural dilemma, affecting countless grain farmers every year, and you have probably never heard of it. Even locally, it's a massive issue. The newspaper almost always has some article about a grain-related incident. These deeply plague the town. I got in touch with a professional who is more qualified than I to talk about it.
Different kinds of grains have different textures, so some would probably be better than others. Around here, a lot of the grain is corn, but that's probably has a lower percentage of entrapment, although because the granules are larger, but they're smoother, it's more like pebbles, so corn would rarely get stuck in the chutes. There would be less reason for people to get to the silos, although it's possible that kids might still do that for whatever reason they do it in the first place. As I mentioned before, my great uncle got stuck in grain when he was actually working as a kid in Kansas. Here in this town, we have an unbelievable amount of grain entrapment incidents, or GEIs as we like to call them. At least 2 in 10 people will be affected by one in their life, whether directly or through a family member or relative. And it's no thanks to the misinformation that the Western University provides. But don't even get me started about that.
And that misinformation is a large part of the issue, with many not knowing what to do to prevent a grain incident, or God forbid what to do if one actually happens to them, which is an unfortunately high possibility. A big part of this issue is that no one really knows where to get information from, due to a strange feud that I got the other side to shed some light on.
Grain is alive. It lives, it breathes, and when someone who has trapped it like that comes into contact with it, it knows. It knows. The information provided by the East University has definitely not helped the issue. The reason for that is clear. We have a different opinion on how much of an issue it actually is. You see, depending on which numbers you look at, approximately 3 in 10 people will be affected by a grain silo complication, or, as we experts call it, a GSC. In my years of teaching, I've had a myriad of students come through my class and tell me exactly how they've been affected by GSCs. If memory serves me correct, I think I might have even had the privilege of teaching Blue himself.
Blue is somewhat of a local legend, and a very relevant one at that.
Hi, my name is George Rabbit Hole, and I am the mother of Blue. Blue has been entrapped in a grain silo for about 3 years now, and I knew he was going to get trapped in there. He always played near grain in the grain fields, always in the grain silos.
This incident shook the town, with horror stories of Blue's experience circulating the community. This is an experience I'm sure we'd all like to know more about, but unfortunately he was grain entrapped. I can't exactly sit him down and film him for an interview. So I did it through Discord. What exactly was it like to get entrapped in grain?
Well, when I fell into the silo, all I could see was corn. And that's still all I can see, because I'm still in the silo. But
What's been the hardest part about adjusting to this sort of new life of yours?
Uh, well, I do love corn and all, but I think the hardest part is that I just miss other kinds of grain. I love corn, but I just wish I could see them one more time.
Is there anything you wish more people knew about grain entrapment?
You know, I just wish people knew the sheer number of grains that are in each silo. Like, there's probably at least 1,000 in here. And I also wish that people were just aware of the number of people who are grain trapped right now. There's probably 1,000 of them too.
Any closing statements?
Uh, being trapped in grain, it has its pros and cons. Like, some of the cons are, uh, there's a lot of corn and it's kind of dark, but at least I'm not at my mom's house, so I think it's alright.
I can't help my baby boy anymore. It's not like we can communicate. He can only speak through hands, and even then he hasn't even learned sign language. Like, he's not a very lucky boy, and only 35% of people, 35, get trapped in stupid grain silos. And my baby boy was one of them. My boy always tried to fit in. Any grocery store is miles away from our little town. So, and there are just grain fields everywhere here. So, everyone has no other choice than to go playing in the grain field and go running around in the dry water.
Which leads to another topic, the abuse of grain, which is an issue that plagues this community and many like it. I was able to get in contact with one of the most notorious grain dealers in the area. He wishes to remain anonymous, so for the sake of this documentary, we will refer to him as his street name, Speedweed. And he provided some fascinating insight.
Oh, well, there's lots of types of grain. There's corn and oats and rice and barley and wheat and frosted mini wheats and Fruit Loops and bread and pasta and cereal and wheat. Kids are definitely the most common victim. You know how they be. They're always playing in the grain. There's not much else to do around here, this town. You're either in the grain or you're out. The mortality rate of grain, probably about 75%. 75% of people are going to be grain trapped in their lifetimes. It's rough out there. And the mortality rate is not that good either. It's about 76%, 77 maybe.
Are children allowed to be employed in grain storage structures?
I employ almost exclusively children. They're really the only ones that I trust with this matter. Yeah, I've been a grain dealer for about 12 years. It's a pretty good racket, especially around here. I've got a good deal. I'm real excited for it coming up. I'm making a whole $86.
In a one-of-a-kind opportunity, he let me film this deal, which was enlightening, to say the least. The deal, however, quickly went sour. Convinced that I had ratted him out, he unfortunately abandoned his part in this documentary, and I was unable to get in contact with him before tragedy struck. The band you've just heard is I Hate Weezer, Speed's strange experimental indie band. Shortly after filming this documentary, the band went on tour for their new album, Fries for Frank, and they picked an interesting venue for their local show, the inside of a grain bin. About 3 songs in, the encrusted grain surface collapsed and the whole band was entrapped. There were no survivors. Tragedies like these can certainly make us wonder how we can be safe and avoid such incidents, and the answer to this is relatively unclear. Sure, there are some safety precautions, like use a harness and stay away from grain, but these aren't known to have a super high efficiency rate. Grain is a high threat to you, whether you know it or not, and there are even some surprisingly weird risk factors. One of the only things I could get both schools of thought to agree on.
Weird names. Weird names are potentially the biggest risk factor for grain entrapment.
It's a crazy claim, but true. In 2017, a report claimed that people with unconventional names were more than 3 times as likely to be grain entrapped, a number too large to ignore. The unfortunate truth is that there's no way to completely avoid grain entrapment. It can and will affect you. There's no true way to demonstrate the horrors of grain entrapment without a state-of-the-art simulation. So, what did we learn? In a world where grain entrapment runs free, threatening millions, the discussion is being silenced. While researching, filming, talking to victims, and even losing them, I have learned so much about this secret horror. I don't know where I'm going, but I know what I left behind. I no longer consider myself the grain man.
The likelihood of grain entrapment? Probably around 99%.